Hey guys, this is Sam with the Nixon Offroad crew. You guessed it, we're souping up our Wrangler again. This is a 2008 to 2017 Jeep Wrangler JK, and we're going to be installing a new front fender. This thing is highly functional. First of all, it has a powder-coated steel finish. It has 2 additional LED lights. We have our turn signal light here and our daytime running light right here. It's got a sleek, aggressive style to it, and it has high wheel clearance. Now, it does take a moment to take the fender off here, so let's get started on the OEM.
We're going to start under the wheel well with removing these 6 plastic clips on the OEM fender liner. This is a push-in clip, and you'll need to use a panel removing tool for an easier time. And now we need to remove this 10mm bolt as shown here. Next, we'll be removing these plastic rivets that can be easily notched out with a torque and hammer. These are DIY friendly tools to avoid the hefty cost of a professional punching tool. Just give each one a firm couple of taps and they will push out. Now we can use the prying tool to separate the inner fender liner from the fender flare. You can also go ahead and pull out the rivets at this point as well. We can then carefully separate the inner fender liner and move it out of the Jeep. Next, we're going to unclip the parking light harness connector located right here. Just go ahead and depress the clip on the back and pull it and you'll be done. Next, we're going to need to remove these 5 fender bracket bolts. Now we're going to be removing this OEM clip. Now it is possible to unclip this from the back, but we're just going to be prying it out with a tool. We'll be removing these 3 clip tabs first. If you wish to carefully remove these yourself, grab some needle nose pliers to unclip them from the back as you pull from the front. Keep in mind though that some of the top clips will be completely inaccessible from the back. At some point it's going to require some force to pull the OEM front fender out. The right technique here is to wiggle the fender as you pull up and towards you at the same time. If there are still clips on the Jeep body, go ahead and remove them at this time. Now we're ready to repair the front fender flare on the workbench by attaching the included weather seal. This is going to protect the finish on your Jeep, and just make sure the flat side is facing outwards. Now we're ready to attach the sleek new front fender onto the Jeep, so we're going to go ahead and carefully rest it on this bracket. Be sure to tension with your other hand as you secure the first bolt and nut to the Jeep body. With the front fender now steady in place, you can go ahead and attach the rest of the 8 bolts as shown here. We're going to quickly prepare our bolts by sliding on this black lug washer. Now this is optional, but it will add additional holding force, and we're going to round it out with the washer plate and just make sure the order is correct on every one. Patience is going to be required as some of these bolts are trickier to attach than others. Some of the spaces are pretty tight and tools will be required for some of them. So now that the last 8 bolts have been attached, go ahead and check all the points. Make sure that nothing is loose. Also make sure the weather seal is aligned and in place. Last step is to tighten everything down and you're done with this part of the installation. We still have a fair ways to go though, as we still need to wire up these 2 additional LED lights. We're going back to the workbench to show more clearly the wiring for the additional LED daytime running light and the secondary turn signal light. We're going to focus on the different wiring that you'll see on your new fender flares, starting with this red wire that serves as the connector for the power source on the DRL. The black wire right next to it serves as the ground. This other black ground wire is the connector for the turn signal light. As you can see, we have 2 connectors on this wire. We'll start by plugging in the match connector to the DRL wire as seen here. And we'll leave the other end for the OEM parking light harness connector. The last wire is the yellow one here, which is for the turn signal power source. You'll also find included in your packaging this long extension wire. This extension wire should be long enough to run from side to side of the Jeep and then to the fuse box to connect the DRL lights. It also includes 3 wire tappers for tapping into the OEM wires. We're now ready to head back to the Jeep to see what our wires look like immediately after unwrapping them. We'll start by making sure, as said before, that the match connector is plugged into the DRL wire. Now we can grab this last ground connector and plug it back into the OEM parking light harness connector. Next, we're going to be heading a little lower to disconnect this OEM turn signal connector by pulling back the tab and pressing down on the clip. Now expose the harness wire by unwrapping the tape around the plastic protective covering. We've chosen to very carefully slice the electric tape to gain access into the wires. If you're uncomfortable with this, we recommend just unwrapping it. Now go ahead and pull the wiring out. There should be 3 different colored wires here. We want the turn signal power source wire that is closest to the red tab as shown here. We're going to use the included blue wire tapper to connect this wire to the Jeep. Simply slide the tapper into the second slot. Then take the yellow wire for the turn signal light and slide it into the other slot. Use pliers to force down the silver pin to create contact between the 2 wires. Push down hard to ensure a good connection. Then flip over and secure the plastic locking cover. Before we move forward, it's a good idea at this point to test the light. So plug it back in, turn your Jeep on, and you should see the regular turn signal light will flash along with the additional sequential turn signal light on the front fender. Now that we've successfully tested our lights, we can pull this connector out. It's time to protect this wire again by wrapping around and re-securing the turn signal harness. Take your time with this step, as the blue tapper will obviously not fit into the plastic protective covering. Just make it as clean as you can. Now we'll wrap it with electrical tape to simulate the original OEM protection on it. After we've thoroughly wrapped this harness, we can go ahead and plug it back in. Be sure to lock it in place by pushing up on the button and in on the tab. We can now move on to wiring the other additional light with the DRL power source wire. This red wire tapper is optional if you want this light to serve as a parking light. It's easier on the workbench to show you how we intend on using this DRL extension wire. As said before, this wire is long enough to extend side to side and then connect to the Jeep's fuse box. There are 3 connection ends on this extension wire. These 2 with the prepared connectors are for the Fender Flare DRL wire connectors. They connect to each other easily with no need for additional tools. We're heading back under the Jeep to connect this extension wire. Start with the end with the bare wire connection as seen here. Find a through access from the bottom to the top of the Jeep. We found this spot to be the easiest and most convenient for all of the connections. Run the extension wire through until you see the first end with the prepared connector. Leave about 6 to 7 inches for the connection to the DRL on this front fender, so you have ample room to now connect the DRL wires together. Remember to push in firmly for the strongest connection. We recommend that you wrap this connection with electrical tape. This not only protects it from moisture, it also provides additional security to prevent it from ever being disconnected. Take the other prepared connector end and run it through the same point as before from bottom to top. This one we're going to pull all the way through and keep it separate from the other bundle of the same wire. Now we're going to lay out this wire where we want it to go under the front grille to the other side of the Jeep. We need to remove these 4 clips, which can be easily notched out with a tool. Once all 4 are removed, we can go ahead and slip the wire under the grille from one side all the way to the other, making sure that they're all hidden and secure. With the wire now successfully run to the other side, we can reinsert the clips. We can now find an easy access point to run this wire down from top to the bottom. You'll see the wire pop out underneath. You can go ahead and leave it here until you're ready to attach the other side of the light. Once everything is connected on the lighting for both fender flares, you can start organizing and strapping the extra loose wires. The last part is connecting the bare connector end seen here to one of the fuses in the Jeep's fuse box. Based on what we have found for this accessory's power source, the power socket fuse shown here is the most compatible function for the additional DRL. There are other options though that you can choose to use for the fuses. Simply insert the bare connector end of the wire into the selected fuse contact slot as shown here. And then we recommend using some pliers for better access to reinsert the fuse. And make sure it is sitting correctly and maintaining good contact. Now use a cutter or a drill to create a small hole or groove to run the wire through the fuse box. This way the cover will close completely without any disruption from the additional wire. It's a good idea at this point to test the DRL before closing up the fuse box. Once the lights have been confirmed, you can go ahead and close up the fuse box, and it's now about organizing and tying up any loose wires. Zip ties come in real handy here. Zip ties come in real handy here. Be sure to wrap up the wires cleanly and find spots to hide away all of the wire bundles. Same goes for the loose wires in the wheel wells. Now we have decided to slide them into the original fender flare brackets to hang and hide them. Once all the wires have been organized, we are wrapped on this installation. Now your Jeep features an additional LED DRL and sequential turn signal lights for stronger illumination, safety, and functionality for your Jeep Wrangler beast.
And we are done with our front fender installation. As you can tell, this is a beautiful, sleek, aggressive design. It's got high wheel clearance, it's got a powder-coated steel finish. We have additional LED turn signal lights and daytime running lights. This thing is packed full of functionality. Now, it's gonna take the average person around 2.5 to 3 hours to install this on both sides. Now, that includes the OEM removal, it includes the rewiring of the lights, and the installation of the new front fender. As always, guys, take your time, make sure you do it right the first time, and have fun.